In this episode of Synthpop Reviews, we're going to continue to reorder the list of the greatest new wave bands and artists that is posted on digitaldreamdoor.com. In the previous episode, I talked about the list that's on digitaldreamdoor.com, and I encourage you to check that out for yourself. You can go look at the list that they have posted there. It's a good list, but in the previous episode, I talked about some of my quibbles or complaints about their list. And then I started the process of reordering the list based on my opinion and how I think also music critics and experts and, the music world, how would they see these bands? So please definitely check out my previous episode. In that episode, I started by talking about the bands on the digitaldreamdoor.com list that I don't think even qualify as new wave bands. Also, a few that I've never even heard of, which is kind of a bad sign. I consider myself a super fan of new wave music. We have a radio station here that plays new wave music constantly, and I listen to that. I also have a huge CD collection of new wave music, so I probably would have heard of these bands and enjoyed their music at this point if they really were among the top 100 greatest new wave bands of all time. So I went through that list. I also went through a list of what I consider to be honorable mention, bands like Kajagoogoo, Red Rockers, Dexy's Midnight Runners, and went through some of those. And then I started putting what I think really are the top 100 or 125 or so new wave bands of all time. Started putting them into 5 tiers. The tiers are essential, near essential, excellent, very good, and good. And in the previous episode, we went through all of the bands I considered to be in the good tier. So if you missed that episode, you've got to go back and listen to it. And I'm sure I'm wrong in some of your eyes, at least in several areas. But in this episode, let's move on to the very good tier. This tier features some really good bands that some of these are among my very favorites personally. But let's jump right in. The first band that I have listed here, and it's in no particular order, all of these in the very good tier I see as being on equal footing. Yes, maybe some are slightly higher than others or lower than others. But let's take a look at what I have here. The very first band I mention is The Fix. The Fix had this very polished sound. Some of the criticisms of The Fix are that their producers did a lot of the work to make them sound good. That maybe the songs naturally weren't that great, but with the help of the producers, they turned out really well. I don't think that's a very fair criticism. I think, the band working together with the producer, that's a team that produces these songs. And if the finished result is fantastic, then it's fantastic. So I've never really appreciated that criticism of The Fix. I discovered The Fix for myself when I was, I think, 15. Actually, no, I was 16 when I first started getting into The Fix. I had heard the song One Thing Leads to Another, and I liked it a lot. It was among my favorite songs, but that was all that I knew by The Fix until I bought their Best Of album, and I fell in love with pretty much every song on that album. One of my favorite songs by The Fix is Saved by Zero, and I kind of like the meaning behind it as well. If you want to know some of the meaning behind it, you can check out some YouTube videos that cover that. But another favorite Fix song of mine is the song Red Skies at Night. I think it's very well done. Good song. Okay, next we have a band called XTC. Now, among certain circles, XTC is looked on very highly, like by critics and people like that. I mainly have their Best Of album, I believe, but I'm sure that their individual albums are also really good. Some of the criticisms of XTC are that they kind of needed an editor. On some of their albums, they put in way too many songs, according to some people, just a little bit too much filler here and there. There's several XTC songs that I really like. Probably my favorite is the Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead. I just find it really interesting. I like the story that's in it. I find it to be a compelling song. I like it a lot. Another band or artist that I think belongs in the very good category is Adam Ant. I like several of his songs, and his best of is pretty good. I think some of his music maybe doesn't hold up as well as it might have, but I think that's where he belongs in very good. I put Berlin in this category. I like some of their songs. Same kind of thing. They have a good best of album with some good music. Most people know Berlin, of course, for the song Take My Breath Away that was featured in the Tom Cruise movie Top Gun. But they have other good songs as well, like The Metro and Masquerade. I like that song as well. And there are other good songs by Berlin. The next band I want to talk about on the very good tier is the Australian rock band called The Church. And The Church is a really interesting band. They have had many careers, basically, within their larger career as a band. My favorite album by The Church is the album Starfish, and I think that's pretty typical of people that like new wave. Their absolute best song, in my opinion, is the song Under the Milky Way. I think it's a new wave classic. That alone gives them a spot on this list. It's such a good song. But I also love the song Reptile. And, I recently got a best of album by The Church, and I'm coming to appreciate a lot more of their music. Later, The Church changed their sound quite a bit and focused, a lot on poetry. They're really poetic in their approach and their lyrics, but some really good stuff. The next band I want to talk about in this tier is Haircut 100. Definitely kind of a synth-pop style band. My favorite song by them is Love Plus One. You've probably heard it. It's a good one, but they've got other good songs as well. Moving on to Men Without Hats. Now, for me, Men Without Hats, really deserves to be higher on the list than this, but I think they're unfairly labeled sometimes as a one-hit wonder. They found a lot of success with the song The Safety Dance, and that probably is their top song that they've ever produced. They have had other hits. Pop Goes the World was a big hit when I was in junior high school. I loved that song. It's a really good one. But I really like a lot of their music. Antarctica is a good one. I Got the Message. I like that one a lot. Where Do the Boys Go is pretty good. I like Editions of You, and Living in China is kind of fun. They've got several songs that I really like. Even songs like Hey Men, I think that's kind of an interesting song with an interesting message. And then they also made some comebacks later in their career with some interesting music as well. So I like Men Without Hats. Next, we get to a musician, an artist that I think belongs in this list, but maybe even moving into the excellent list, kind of caught between the two, I guess, and that is Alison Moyet. You may know that Alison Moyet is one of the founding members of Yazoo. She combined with Vince Clarke to create the band Yazoo. In the United States, they had to change their name to Yaz, but they made some just amazing music in just a couple of albums. After leaving Yazoo, Alison Moyet went on to create some amazing music. Her best of or greatest hits album is just fantastic, start to finish. Some of the best songs by her are Love Resurrection. I like All Cried Out. I like Is This Love? The song Invisible is gorgeous, and I just love it. Her voice is amazing. It's kind of deep sounding for a woman, but it's rich and powerful. I love her music. Some of my other favorite songs by Alison Moyet are Weak in the Presence of Beauty, Wishing You Were Here, Whispering Your Name is a great one. I like Getting Into Something, that's pretty good. And I even like the song That Old Devil Called Love. I think it's a cover, pretty sure, but that's a good song as well. So I'm a big fan of Alison Moyet. If you aren't familiar with her solo work, you should definitely check it out. Our next band in the very good tier is The Sundays. And The Sundays only had 3 albums. The first is called Reading, Writing, and Arithmetic. And it's got one of the most beautiful new wave songs I've ever heard. It's called Here's Where the Story Ends. And if you like new wave music, you've probably heard this song. It's just basically perfection. It's so good. Other songs by The Sundays that I like include Wild Horses, Goodbye is pretty good. Summertime, I like that one a lot. There's Hideous Towns is pretty good. They have several other songs as well that are good. So I like the Sundays. The singer has a gorgeous voice, just beautiful. Their music doesn't utilize the synthesizer like I normally prefer. I think there is some synth work, but it's not as prominent as I would prefer, but that's okay. Next, we get to really one of my favorite bands, and it's Sparks. You may know that there was recently a documentary made of Sparks. If you're a fan of theirs, or even of synth-pop or new wave at all, you should watch that documentary. I wish they didn't have as much swearing as they do in it. I think it made it rated R, but I've watched an edited version of it. I'm kind of wimpy when it comes to swear words, and so I just loved watching that documentary. It gives some really good insights into the band Sparks. But they started out kind of as a prog rock kind of band, or art rock, glam rock, but then they transitioned into new wave and synth pop, and really they were kind of pioneers of the new wave synth pop sound. Before they transitioned to new wave and synth pop, they had a few hits, some pretty big ones, including the song This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us, which was huge in Europe, not as big in the United States, but still, a good hit for them. And I like that song. I also like Amateur Hour, No More Mr. Nice Guys, and they have some other songs like Never Turn Your Back on Mother Earth. That's a good one. Something for the Girl with Everything. Get in the Swing is pretty good. And so all of those are songs that I don't really consider to be new wave or synth pop. They're kind of just art rock or glam rock. But then they transitioned to new wave and really synth pop, and they came out with a few songs that I think are just awesome synth pop. One of my favorites is Tryouts for the Human Race. It's kind of funny. I like the lyrics, and the song is really fun. I like Beat the Clock. I like the number one song in Heaven. That's one of my favorite Sparks songs. Very synth heavy and beautiful song. When I'm With You, I like. Tips for Teens is kind of funny, and it's a good song. Funny Face, I like that one as well. They have a song called Angst in My Pants that's kind of funny as well. I Predict, I like that one. Sherlock Holmes is another good song by Sparks. As you can see, I really like this band. I'm naming tons of their songs. And then one of the best new wave songs by Sparks is Cool Places. Popularity is good though as well. I Wish I Looked a Little Better is fantastic. It's funny and fun to listen to. With All My Might is another good song by Sparks. And then we get to one of their best songs. It's Change. I love the song Change. I think it was ahead of its time. In the new wave kind of synth movement, it was ahead of the curve. I like the song Music That You Can Dance To. I think the lyrics are a little bit ironic, I guess it might be the right word, but I like the song. It's really good. So Important is a good song as well. National Crime Awareness Week is a fun, kind of funny song that I like that's by them. And then we get to one of my all-time favorite synth pop songs by any band, and that's When Do I Get to Sing My Way? This song is just gorgeous and so fun to listen to. I love the vocals. I love the synth work. It's just a great song. Let's Go Surfing is pretty good. Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat's pretty good. And Sparks are still writing new music. They have several newer albums that really have kind of left new wave and synth pop behind a little bit, but there's still some good music being made by them. For example, there's a song called Lighten Up Morrissey that I kind of like. There's one called It's a Knockoff. I love that one. It's kind of fun. The Calm Before the Storm, My Baby's Taking Me Home is fun. So if you're not familiar with Sparks, check them out. Their mid-career is full of new wave and synth pop, but all of their work is, I think, worth paying attention to and listening to. Okay, enough time with Sparks. That's one of my favorites, so I spent too much time there. But let's move on to another band that belongs in the new wave category if we're taking into account what critics would say, right? And that is Alphaville. Alphaville is one of my all-time favorite bands. For me, they belong in the near essential category, or maybe even essential, but I'm biased toward them. I really love Alphaville. The vocalist, Marion Gold, has just amazing vocals. What a voice. He can sing the high notes beautifully. He can sing low beautifully, everything in between. And I love the synth work that Alphaville produced. Of course, their biggest hit is big in Japan, but maybe their greatest legacy is the song Forever Young. Both of those are off of their debut album, Forever Young. But on that debut album, there are several other songs that I think are equally good and powerful. And in my mind, I love them just as much as Big in Japan and Forever Young. Some of those that I would put in that same category are A Victory of Love, Summer in Berlin, To Germany with Love. And out of this, group that I'm mentioning, probably the greatest is a song called Sounds Like a Melody. It's just a gorgeous song. I love it. Fallen Angel is one of my favorites. A lot of people have heard of the song The Jet Set. It was a single. It was a good, solid song. It's not necessarily one of my very favorites, but it's solid. And that's all off of their first album, which I think is considered a new wave classic. It certainly should be. It's well regarded, at least. But then they followed it up with an album called Afternoons in Utopia that I have come to appreciate just as much as Forever Young. It's definitely different, but I love it. Then they came out with several other albums. The Breathtaking Blue was the last album that I think most people in the United States paid attention to by Alphaville. Has a great song called Romeo's on it, and several other really good songs too. But at that point in 1989, it was when it came out. But within a couple of years, I think most people in the United States had kind of stopped paying attention to Alphaville. And that's too bad, because they came out with several other albums, one called Prostitute. I don't love the name of that album, but if you know what it's referring to, it's not a crude reference. It sounds like it is, but it's not. The next album after that, Salvation, is fantastic, and they've continued to produce albums. One of their very best, I think, of their whole career is 2010's Catching Rays on Giant. Kind of a weird name for the album, but what a great album. So I love Alphaville. You probably know that if you've listened to my episode focused just on Alphaville. I'll leave it there with Alphaville, but I believe they belong in essential or near essential. But taking into account maybe what critics would say, I've dropped them down to the very good tier. Okay, let's move on, and I need to pick up the pace a little bit. Let's move on to Lightning Seeds. Lightning Seeds have several great songs that I love. Probably my favorite is the song Pure. It's probably one of their biggest hits, I think, that they had. All I Want is great. Just beautiful music. The Life of Riley is one of my favorites by them. And they really had a good career. You should check out Lightning Seeds. Okay. Also in this category, I put Midnight Oil and Modern English. Both have really good songs. Modern English has the song Melt With You. That song alone puts them in this category, but I don't like a whole lot more by them, to be honest. Maybe I need to revisit it. Midnight Oil, I put in this category. I have 6 or 7 songs that I really like by Midnight Oil. I think they got a lot of respect back in the day for some of their political stances and things like that. I don't know how well their music holds up, at least based on the critics. I still like them. Their best of is really good. Beds Are Burning and The Dead Heart, both of which are from their Diesel and Dust album from 1987. Those 2 songs alone put them on this list. They're just awesome songs. Still played all the time on my local radio station. So check out Midnight Oil and Modern English. Next we have Soft Cell. I really like Soft Cell. I should probably delve into their music a little deeper. Tainted Love, you can't resist the song Tainted Love. It's just so good. And they have other songs as well that I like a lot. Next we have Devo, and Devo's kind of tricky. I think they get a lot of respect, for being pioneers of synth-pop and new wave, and for clever lyrics and things like that. To be honest, they get on my nerves sometimes, their music does. But I do think their greatest hits album is a must-have for new wave fans. Of course, their most famous song is probably Whip It, and I like that song, it's good. Through Being Cool is a good song. Girl You Want is good. Freedom of Choice is pretty good. Working in the Coal Mine I like. Really, their whole greatest hits album is worth listening to, but I think most people know them mainly for Whip It. Let's move on. Next we have Naked Eyes. This is another example of a band that's unfairly labeled a one-hit wonder. In their case, it's the song Always Something There to Remind Me, which I believe their version is a cover version of an original song sung by someone else. Having said that, though, the way they executed this song is fantastic, and it alone puts them in this list, in this tier of very good new wave synth pop bands. Naked Eyes, though, is not a one-hit wonder. They had a song called Promises, Promises that I consider to be just as good as Always Something There to Remind Me. And they have many other songs that are very high quality, excellent synth pop. For example, Voices in My Head is a really good one. Flag of Convenience, I like that one. Eyes of a Child, it's a beautiful song. In the Name of Love is good. No Flowers, Please. And I could go on and on. They have a lot of good songs, maybe not that rise to the level of Promises, Promises, or Always Something There to Remind Me, but their best of especially is really worth listening to. Next, we get to a band by the name of The Call. And I feel like this band, their reputation has really been on the rise in the last few years. Looking back on the 80s and different bands and things, seems like the reputation of The Call has really risen. And I think it's with good reason. They have several really good songs. Let the Day Begin is one of the best. The Walls Came Down is good. Everywhere I Go, I really like that song. But their very best song, in my opinion, is I Still Believe. This is a classic new wave song. I just love it. It's fantastic. So track down a copy of The Call's greatest hits or the best of The Call. They have several different best of albums. Or look up each of their individual albums. They have really good music. Okay, let's move on now to Real Life. Real Life is another personal favorite of mine that I would rank much higher if it was just based on my own taste in music. But I think that the critics, in some cases, wouldn't agree with me. I love their debut album, Heartland. This is the album that has most of the songs that most of the world would know, especially the song Send Me an Angel. All-time classic new wave song. That song alone, I know I say this a lot, but that one song puts them in this list of the top 100 bands of all time, in my opinion. But Real Life has much more than just Send Me an Angel. Probably my second favorite song by them is the song Catch Me I'm Falling. I believe it deserved to be just as big of a hit as Send Me an Angel. They have a song called Under the Hammer that's pretty good. Always is a really good song by them. Open Hearted, Exploding Bullets. Burning Blue is probably in my top 10 of songs by Real Life. All of those songs I just mentioned are off of their debut album. And, I mentioned that the critics might not agree with me that Real Life is a really good band. Having said that, if you go to allmusic.com, where they try to review every album by every band, of course they don't reach that, but they give this album almost 5 stars. It's like 4.5 out of 5 stars, and they love it based on their review. The follow-up album they gave 4 stars, 2 out of 5. So, they are pretty highly rated by allmusic.com. And Real Life continued to produce good music even as recently as 2004, and they've produced more stuff after that as well. Other favorites of mine by Real Life include Let's Fall in Love, Flame, One Blind Love, No Shame. Face to Face is a really good one. When I was in high school in 1990, they came out with the album Lifetime that had a radio hit called God Tonight. I'm not sure I love the lyrics and the meaning in this song, but the song itself sounds amazing. I also like the song Kiss the Ground off that same album. Really, that whole album is fun to listen to. But similar to Alphaville, after that album, they kind of dropped off the radar in the United States, but they continued to make good music. They came out with 3 more albums, Happy and Imperfection. These were both released in kind of the underground synth-pop scene. I really like Imperfection. I think it's an excellent album. And then in 2020, Real Life surprised me by coming out with a digital-only album. It may have been released on a very limited scale on CD, but this album is called Sirens, and every song on it is excellent. If you're a Real Life fan, I hope you will check out Sirens by Real Life. My favorite song on that album is The Color of Light. It's excellent. But I also like My Beautiful Monster, Here Come the Spacemen, and some others as well that are on that album. Let's move on now to Bengals. And Bengals had a lot of hits in the 80s, that's for sure. You've probably heard of Manic Monday, Walk Like an Egyptian. It was one of their biggest hits. Eternal Flame is good. Hazy Shade of Winter is a pretty good one as well. Walking Down Your Street. So they had several songs that were regularly played in the 80s. It feels like their legacy has kind of diminished a little bit over the years. I might be wrong about that, but even though they had several hits in the 80s, I did put them in the very good category, just based on the perception that I have of their status, I guess, with critics and other music experts. Next, we have the band Madness. Madness had a few hits that I just love, like One Step Beyond, and of course, Our House, just a fantastic song. The Sun and the Rain is pretty good, and they have other good songs as well. I like their best of, so I put them on this list. Next, let's move on to English Beat. I admit that I need to give English Beat more attention. I haven't really studied their music and really delved into it much. I do like Mirror in the Bathroom. I like, of course, Save It for Later. I think everybody probably likes that one. Tears of a Clown is pretty good. And I'm sure if I got their best of and really paid more attention to their songs, I'd probably be able to name a lot more that are good. Next up, let's tackle the Housemartins. The Housemartins are an interesting band. They have a good sense of humor, and so when I'm listening to their music, it makes me smile, makes me laugh a little bit. I kind of think of them as being kind of wacky, sometimes. But their music is really good. I liked some of their songs in the 80s and 90s, and then I kind of set them aside for a while. I recently picked up their best of, and I was shocked at how much I love their music. It just had been a while since I had listened to them, and I was struck by how many songs I knew and really enjoyed. Happy Hour is one of their most famous. It's a really good one. Flag Day I like. Think for a Minute is a really good song by them. But when I'm listening to their albums, either the individual albums or the best of, I have all of their stuff pretty much. I really enjoy pretty much every song. I love the vocalists. There's like 2 different vocalists that are the main singers, and they're really good. The song The People Who Grinned Themselves to Death, kind of a weird title, but it's a great song. I Can't Put My Finger on It, that's another good one. The Light Is Always Green. I like that one. Me and the Farmer is one of my favorites by them. It's just very catchy. I like it a lot. And I could name another 6 or 7 other songs by the Housemartins that I really enjoy. But check out really any of their albums or greatest hits or best ofs. You'll enjoy pretty much every song if you're a new wave fan. Next, we have Lloyd Cole, and we could say Lloyd Cole and the Commotions either way, but I really like their song Rattlesnakes. That's my favorite song by them. Perfect Skin is good though too, and they have other good songs. Those are my 2 favorites, and I'm going to move on now, but I really feel like Lloyd Cole is a little bit of a gap in my knowledge. I like Rattlesnakes, the album and the song, and some of his other work, but I need to give that a little bit more attention, I think. There's probably some more stuff that I'm missing. Tell me in the comments below this video, if you're watching it, what I should check out by Lloyd Cole. Let's move on to Wall of Voodoo, and I'm going to say Wall of Voodoo / Stan Ridgway. And I know that that's not completely fair to Wall of Voodoo because they continued after Stan Ridgway left, and they put out some really good music, and they got a new singer. But in my mind, these 2 are linked completely, Stan Ridgway and Wall of Voodoo. You've got to check out the song Salesman. I love it. Lonely Town is good. Drive, She Said is fantastic. I love Going Southbound. Just a great song. Ring of Fire is a good song too. It's the famous song just redone. And then Stan Ridgway has a song called Camouflage, one of my all-time favorite songs of all time of any kind. but it's really good. I like the Overlords. Lost Weekend is good. The Big Heat is one of my favorites. Peg and Pete and Me is good. Mexican Radio is a Wall of Voodoo song that is so good. You've probably heard it. And Walking Home Alone, that's another favorite of mine. So several of those are Stan Ridgway songs. The others are Wall of Voodoo songs, but Stan Ridgway was the lead singer of Wall of Voodoo for much of their career. So if you're not familiar with this music, it tends to often tell stories, especially the Stan Ridgway songs. He was a storyteller, really, through his music. So you get pictures in your head of what he's talking about. The music is fun and exciting and interesting. He's got a strange voice, for some of these songs, but I love it. I think it's fantastic, but check it out. If you're not familiar with Wall of Voodoo, Stan Ridgway, you're in for a treat. Okay, moving on to another of my favorites. And as you can see, I just love so many of these bands in the very good category, as was true of those in the good category in my previous episode. But it's going to get harder and harder for me to be concise as we move up this chart and get into the higher tiers of excellent, near essential, and essential. I'm already having trouble just in the very good category of being concise because these bands are just so good and their music is so important to me and so fantastic. Okay, so next we get to a favorite of mine. It's the Silencers. I would put them much higher on this list if it were just up to my own opinion. But the Silencers are a Scottish band that I feel like falls into the new wave category. They were founded in London in '86, but they just recently came out with an album, and I haven't purchased it yet, but I've listened to some of the clips, and it sounds really good. So I hope you'll check out the Silencers. My favorite songs by the Silencers, at the very top, I would put Razor Blades of Love. It's just a fantastic song. Love it. The lyrics are poignant and make sense to me. I don't know if they make sense to you, but they sure do to me. Probably my second favorite song by the Silencers is I Can't Cry. Listen to those lyrics, and I think you'll understand. This is a deep song. It tackles some tough subjects that aren't cut and dry sometimes. For me they might be, or for you they might be, but the way this song is written, I think it's complex, and it talks about some serious issues that I think we need to think about more and consider. So check out I Can't Cry and all of the music by the Silencers. I love Painted Moon, just a beautiful song. Icy Red is a fun song. Scottish Rain I like. Bulletproof Heart is one of my favorite songs by the Silencers. Hey Mr. Bank Manager is pretty good. I Can Feel It is a good song. Number One Friend is pretty good. Wild Mountain Thyme, I like that one a lot. It's like a traditional Scottish song, but the way the Silencers play that song and compose it is really good. I could name another 10 songs by the Silencers. They have some amazing music. You should check them out. Next, we have a band called Missing Persons, and they're not one of my favorites, to be honest. I do really like the song Destination Unknown. I like Words. That's a good one. Walking in LA, some of the hits that were played on the radio, I've basically named, some of their radio hits. Definitely check them out. I think they're pretty well regarded as, some pioneers of new wave and synth pop. They just don't happen to be one of my favorites. Along those same lines is the band Propaganda. Propaganda seems to be well regarded. They're not one of my favorites. I love the song Duel, and they have some other songs that appeal to me. But I never really have fully understood why they're so highly regarded. But again, I love Duel. And chances are you've heard that song and you probably like it too. It's really good. Heaven 17 is our next band to consider. And Heaven 17 gets credit for being one of the bands at the leading edge of the synth pop and new wave movement. They're linked to Human League, right? They were in the same band together and then broke up, and some of the band members that used to be in Human League founded Heaven 17. They've got some good songs. Penthouse and Pavement is one of their famous songs. My favorite is Let Me Go. It's a really good song. We Don't Need This Fascist Groove Thing is an interesting song that I kind of like. And they've got some other stuff too. I like their best of, and that's kind of what I stick to when it comes to Heaven 17. They, by the way, continued making music into the 2000s, well into the 2000s. So you should check out some of their newer stuff if you're interested. Next, we get to an interesting band called Falco. Falco was an Austrian musician, and he died way too young in a car accident, I believe. And I think Falco is much more highly regarded internationally than he is in the US, but he's most famous for the song Rock Me Amadeus, or maybe Der Kommissar. Probably Rock Me Amadeus is his more famous song. He has another good song called Vienna Calling, and several others that are solid songs. Okay, next we're going to get to a band that some of you may not consider to be new wave, but I think this is a new wave band. Certainly where I live, their music has always been played on the new wave radio stations, and that band is UB40. So you can probably see why I brought up that, you may not consider them to be new wave. They're a reggae band. But the way they execute their songs, and also with the singer that's got, he kind of sounds a little bit Jamaican, but he's also from the UK. The result is it sounds like new wave, at least it does for me. And they have so many songs that I love. This is just going to be quite a long list here. I like the song Red Red Wine, which I believe was written by Neil Diamond originally, but UB40's version of it is much better in my opinion. Please Don't Make Me Cry is good. Cherry O Baby is fantastic. If It Happens Again, I love that song. I Got You Babe, another remake, is really good. Don't Break My Heart is good. Sing Our Own Song is good. Rat in Me Kitchen is good. Here I Am, Come and Take Me is really good. Kingston Town is good. Can't Help Falling in Love is good. And Until My Dying Day. Those are some of my favorites, but there's other really good songs by UB40. Give them a chance if you haven't already listened to them. Okay, this long episode is going to get even longer. We're going to go to Oingo Boingo. This is a band that was pretty huge in the 80s, at least in my town where I live. They were super well regarded, and I think they deserved it. It seems like, though, their legacy has diminished over the years. Danny Elfman was the leader of Oingo Boingo. And of course, he went on to have this prolific, fantastic career, especially in movie soundtracks. He did the music for many of the great movies of the late 80s and early 90s and into the 2000s. So he's probably more famous just for his solo work. But as the leader of Oingo Boingo, he produced some fantastic music with the rest of the band as well. I like the song Only a Lad. It's fantastic. Nothing to Fear But Fear Itself is good. Nothing Bad Ever Happens. Who Do You Want to Be? Weird Science is a good song. Dead Man's Party is probably their most famous song. Just Another Day is great. We Close Our Eyes. That's a gorgeous song. I love it. It's fantastic. When the Lights Go Out is good. Out of Control is good. Not My Slave is good. Gratitude is good. I mean, they've got just a whole bunch of hits. You should check out one of their best of collections. Be discerning about that, though. Some of their best of collections leave off a huge number of their singles and their hits. So check out Oingo Boingo. Just love them. They're great. Okay, let's move on to Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive is known primarily for You Spin Me Round Like a Record. Great song, but they have a lot of other good songs as well. Brand New Lover was played on the radio a lot in my town. Also, Something in My House, My Heart Goes Bang, Lover Come Back to Me. Those are just a few of their other hits that were played locally on the radio station that I listened to. So some good stuff there. Let's move on now to Big Country. They're, of course, most famous for the song In a Big Country. It's such a good song. I love it. But they have other good songs. Harvest Home, Remembrance Day, King of Emotion, and I could go on. They've got other good music as well. Okay, let's jump now to Ocean Blue. Their first album came out in 1989, so kind of toward the tail end of the new wave movement, but I'm so glad that they jumped into the genre. They have so many good songs. On their debut album, I love Between Something and Nothing. That may be their best song. But Vanity Fair is pretty good, Drifting Falling is good, and other songs as well. The lyrics and the music all blend together to this kind of dreamy, beautiful sounding, uplifting, positive sounding music. Their second album is probably my favorite album by them, and maybe that's just because it came out when I was in high school and paying attention to a lot of this music. But the song Cerulean is really good, Breezing Up is good, Ballerina Out of Control is one of my favorite songs by the Ocean Blue. But pretty much that whole second album for me is classic. It's really good. Their third album, Beneath the Rhythm and Sound, is good as well. I like Crash off that album, but there's other good songs as well. And like some of these other bands, they've continued to make music. In 2019, they came out with a new album. So that's, pretty recent that they came out with new music. Next, I'll quickly mention the Go-Go's. I'm not a huge fan of the Go-Go's, but I recognize that they do belong in this list. They have songs like Our Lips Are Sealed. That's probably my favorite song of theirs. They also sing We Got the Beat. That's a good one. Vacation is pretty famous. And they have a couple others that you're probably familiar with. Let's move on next to the band Electronic. Electronic's debut album, also called Electronic, is one of my all-time favorite new wave albums. Every single song is enjoyable. I could name literally every song, but some of my favorites are Get the Message, Feel Every Beat, Tighten Up, The Patience of a Saint, and I could go on. If you're not familiar with Electronic, they consist of Bernard Sumner from Joy Division and New Order, along with Johnny Marr of the Smiths. So you bring Johnny Marr's guitar work to Bernard Sumner's vocals and synthesizer background, and it just goes together so well. Their song Disappointed is also an excellent song that came out on a single. It features vocals by Neil Tennant of the Pet Shop Boys. They came out with a couple of other albums as well, but I don't think they ever got back to the greatness of their debut album, Electronic. Their second album, Raise the Pressure, had some good songs as well. Okay, let's move on to China Crisis. If you're not familiar with China Crisis, check out their Best Of album. Start with that, and I think you'll be drawn in. I love their song African and White. Christian is also a good song. Working with Fire and Still, really good song. Wishful Thinking is good. Black Man Ray is good. King in a Catholic Style is one of their best songs. And then my all-time favorite song by China Crisis is Arizona Sky. You've got to listen to that. It's classic new wave synth pop. But really, their whole Best Of album is excellent. Check them out. Next, we get to Culture Club. And I admit I'm not a big fan of Culture Club. They were so big, though, in the early 80s that I'm including them in this list. You got to like Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Classic song. Church of the Poison Mind was kind of a hit as well. It's pretty good. Karma Chameleon is kind of an irresistible, fun song. So they deserve to be in the very good tier. Let's move on now to one of my final three that belong in this list, and that's Beautiful South. Now, some of you probably know that the Beautiful South are connected to another band in this very good tier, the band The House Martins. Some of the members of the House Martins left the band and ended up forming a new band called The Beautiful South. And they produced more music that I think fits right in with the House Martins. They're full of, again, good humor. There are several songs that have definite comedy in them. But I love them about the same as I do the House Martins. I put them both side by side in this. The vocals are one reason why. You got the same great vocals that you have in the House Martins. I think it's only one of the two vocalists from the House Martins that's in the Beautiful South, but it definitely feels like similar music. It makes total sense to know that they're related bands. I love the song that's called Song for Whoever. Really good song. You Keep It All In is a good song. I'll Sail This Ship Alone is a good song. We Are Each Other is one of the very best songs, I think, by Beautiful South. Bell Bottom Tear is good. 36D is funny, and it's a pretty good song. Good as Gold is fun, and I could go on. They've produced a lot of really good music. Next up, we have the band The Connells. At least that's how I pronounce it. Maybe it's Connells, but I think it's the Connells. The Connells are, I think, best known for the song 7475. It's a fantastic song. I understand why that's their most famous song. But before that, they came out with some music that I loved even more. For example, Stone Cold Yesterday, great song. One Simple Word is a good song. Slack-Jawed is a good song. I don't know I think that was about the same time as 74, 75, but that's a good song. Maybe my favorite song by the Connells is Get a Gun. Really good song, fun song. And there are several other good songs by the Connells. Check them out if you haven't already. I just noticed that they have a best of. I wasn't aware of this. Came out in 2016, and it looks really good, so I'll probably buy that. And finally, we get to the last band that I have in the very good category, the very good tier, in this list of greatest new wave bands, and that is Spandau Ballet. While I'm not a huge fan of this band, I can't resist their best song, which is True. It's a beautiful song with amazing vocals and gets stuck in your head. I really like True. Gold is pretty good, and they have a couple of other good songs, but I'm not as big of a fan of this band as I maybe should be. Maybe I should give them another try, but I feel like they never reached that same height again as they did with the song True. Okay, so that's my rundown of the very good tier or category in my reordered list of the greatest new wave bands and artists. Thanks for sticking with me. If you're still listening, you're a trooper. But if you disagree with any of my takes about these bands, please let me know in the comments below the video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or any other venue, again, feel free to reach out and leave your comments. Please check out my blog, synthpopreviews.blogspot.com. In addition to music videos and other content, you'll find a link to my CD collection. It's a great way to learn about new music, and feel free to click any of those links that I have on the blog and purchase some of this music. That's a way that you can support this podcast, this YouTube channel, is by buying some of the music that I link to. I get a little bit of a kickback. I get half of 1% or whatever of the purchases you make on those albums. So it's kind of a fun way for you to get new music and to also support the podcast. So please join me again next time. In a future episode, we will look at the excellent tier, and I'm excited to tell you about the bands in this tier. If you thought I got excited about the very good category, just wait for the excellent category. So I'll leave it there and talk to you next time.